focus today is going to be lesson 3 of chapter 6, which is solving equations with rational coefficients. One of the things that I think is really important for us to remember is the term rational and what rational means. Remember, rational numbers are numbers that can be written as fractions, okay? And so the main focus today, we're going to be focusing on one-step equations, but your coefficients are going to be either decimals or they're going to be fractions, all right? Leading up to this lesson, we have been working on whole numbers as our coefficients, and so today we're going to primarily focus on decimals or fractions. We're going to go ahead and first start off with the decimal coefficients, practicing with them. So one of the things that we're going to want to do is remember, keep in mind that if your coefficient, remember coefficient is the number that's ahead of your variable. So for example, if I have 2.5x, my coefficient would be 2.5. So one thing to remember is if your coefficient is a decimal, you're going to divide each side by your coefficient. Okay, if we go back and review just for a quick second here, if I have 7 times m equals 49, okay, I have a whole number as a coefficient. If we remember what we did here to solve this, we divided both sides by 7. So we had m equals 7. Same concept here when we're working with decimals. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple examples they have given us. When we take a look on page 458, example 1, it says 16 equals 25 hundredths times n. Okay, again, step number 1, always find your variable. So my variable's on the right-hand side. It's being multiplied by 25 hundredths. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide both sides by 25 hundredths. The 25 hundredths are going to cancel out. So you're going to notice n was on the right-hand side, so it has to stay on the right-hand side. When you take 16 divided by 25 hundredths, you're going to get 64. You can use your calculator on this because we're working with the decimals, so I have no trouble with that. Last but not least, go back and check your solution. So if we plug in 64, so if I think of like a fourth of 64, 25 hundredths times 64, a fourth of 64 is 16, so it does work out. Okay, taking a look at the next example that we have, examples I should say, are going to be your got it problems. So let's talk about these and work through these together here. If we take a look at got it problem letter A, you're going to notice we have a rational coefficient, which is a decimal. We have 8/10 times m. Okay, so because we're multiplying, the opposite is to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 8/10. Okay, so m is going to be left. And then you should be able to plug in your calculator, or if you want to do that mentally in your head, when you take your 6.4 divided by your 8/10, basically you're thinking 64 divided by 8, because you can move your decimal over and we would get 8. Now go back and check your solution. We take 8/10 times 8, do we get 6 4/10? Yes, we do. Okay, letter B, find your variable. Variable is being multiplied by negative 2.8. So we're going to divide both sides by a negative 2.8. So those are going to cancel. P is going to be left. When you take 4 2/10 divided by a negative 2.8, we should come up with a negative 1 5/10. Okay, and again, we want to go back and check that. So if I take negative 2.8 times negative 1.5, I should end up with a 4.2 or 4 2/10. Taking a look at letter C again, find your variable. Variable's right here, it's being multiplied by negative 4.7. So the opposite is to divide by negative 4.7. So those are going to cancel, K is left. When you take a negative divided by a negative, remember we're going to get a positive. And then we have 10 81 hundredths divided by 4 7/10. And when we divide that, we're going to come up with a 2 3/10. Again, when you go back and check it, if I take negative 4 7/10 times 2 3/10, I should get a negative 10 81 hundredths. So there's a few examples that we just completed working with decimal coefficients. All right, let's take a look at example 2. They're giving us a real world situation, and what they want us to do is write an equation, okay, to figure out our answer. It says JS coach agreed to buy ice cream for all of the team members. Ice cream cones are $2.40 each. Write and solve an equation to find how many cones the coach can buy with $30. So we know that the cones are $2.40 each. We don't know how many we're getting, but we know that they're going to cost us $2.40 per cone. So we're thinking 2.4, $2.40 times n. N would be your number of ice cream cones you're getting, equals $30. Again, we have a decimal coefficient here, so we're taking n times 2.4. Opposite would be to divide, so you're going to divide both sides by 2.4. Those are going to cancel out. N is going to equal 12.5. Now, when you think about it, if you would, for example, go down to Blackie's, you're probably not going to ask them for 12.5 ice cream cones. We don't have enough money in this situation to buy 13 of them because that would be more than the $30. So when you're thinking about it in terms of this problem, how many ice cream cones can you get? He's going to be able to get 12. In this case, you're going to have to round that down. So just be thinking about the context of the problem and where your rounding should go. Let's take a look at this one, letter D. It says, suppose the ice cream cones cost $2.80 each. Again, main point here is $2.80 each. How many ice cream cones could the coach buy with $42? So I know that that they're going to cost me $2.80 per ice cream cone. So I'm going to take $2.80 times N. N is the number of ice cream cones. And I have $42 to spend. Okay? So as we take a look at this, then find your variable. It's being multiplied by $2.80. So I'm going to divide both sides by $2.80. Those are going to cancel. N is going to be equal to, when you take 42 divided by $2.80, okay, should come up with, I believe, 15. And the label on that would be cones. Okay, and you can double check that using your calculator as well. So again, those are working with decimal coefficients. The next page is going to focus on fractional coefficients. Okay, fractions are a little bit different. A couple things that you're going to want to remember here, things that are of importance. Okay, if your coefficient in a multiplication equation is a fraction, okay, you have to remember that you need to multiply each side by the reciprocal of your coefficient. So fractions are a little bit different than whole numbers and then decimals, okay? So again, if your coefficient is going to be a fraction, so let's say that I have 1/2 x equals 62, okay? I have a fractional coefficient because my number ahead of my variable, is a fraction. So I have a fractional coefficient. The multiplicative inverse, or the reciprocal of 1/2, would be 2/1 or 2. So technically you're going to multiply both sides by 2. So x is going to equal 124. Okay, and we're going to look at a couple examples that your book has that we can go through. Example 3. 3/4 x equals 12/20. Again, we have a fractional coefficient, so instead of dividing, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Reciprocal of 3/4 would be 4/3, so you can see they're multiplying both sides by 4/3. Those are going to cancel, x is left. When I take 4/3 times 12/20, please look to see if you can cross reduce. I know 4 will go into 25 times, so that becomes a 1. 3 goes into 12 4 times, so that will become a 1. So now I'm looking at x is going to equal 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 5 is 5. So x is equal to 4/5. Please remember to go back and check your solution. So when we plug it in, it should work and that should be correct. Looking at example 4, they've got a negative. Be careful with the negatives. Sometimes the negatives get mixed in with the fraction. So -7/9 times d equals 5. So we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal or the multiplicative inverse. The multiplicative inverse of -7/9 would be -9/7. Okay, so those are going to cancel out. You can see those would cross out, reduce down to 1. So d is left. I'm multiplying this side by -9/7 times 5/1. I can't cross reduce anywhere. So I'm thinking -9 times 5. Okay, so 9 times 5 is 45, and then 7 times 1 is 7. Again, I'm taking a negative times a positive, so it's going to be a negative. You're going to want to make sure you simplify that or put it into lowest terms. Write it as a mixed number. So then when I take -45/7, I know 7 goes into 45 6 times. 7 times 6 is 42. If I take 45 minus 42, I have 3 left, and then my denominator was 7. So my answer is going to be D is going to equal -6 3/7. Okay. There's a couple example problems on the bottom of 459 that we're going to go ahead and do together. So when we take a look at letter E, I got 1/2 x equals 8. So I'm going to rewrite that to give me some more room down here. 1/2 times x. So because it's a fraction, I'm going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Reciprocal of 1/2 would be 2/1 or 2. So these are going to cancel. X is left. 8 times 2 is 16. I'm going to circle that answer. Now I can check it. 1/2 times 16 should be 8. Okay? Letter F. fractional coefficient, -3/4 times x equals 9. I'm going to multiply both sides by -4/3. Those are going to cancel, x is left. I can cross reduce right here. 3 goes into 9 3 times, so 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now I have 3 times -4, which would be -12. And I can check it, -3/4 times 12. So that cancels, that becomes a 3. -3 times 3 equals 9, so it is correct. Taking a look at the last example, again we have a fractional coefficient of -7/8. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by -8/7. So those are going to cancel, x is going to equal. Now I'm going to look to see if I can cross reduce so I don't have to deal with such big numbers. 7 goes into 21 3 times. 8 will go into 64 8 times. So now I'm looking at -3 times -1, which would be a +3. And then I have 8 times 1, which would be 8. Now I can go back and check those. -7/8 times 3/8. Okay, so -7 times 3 would be -21. 8 times 8 is 64. And that does work out. So those are a couple examples with fractional coefficients. Again, when your coefficient is a fraction, one thing that you want to remember is you never divide fractions. We always multiply by the reciprocal. Okay? Let's go ahead and take a look at the real world problem that is on the top of 460. Again, they're giving us a situation and we're going to be setting up an equation. So let's take a look. It says Valerie needs 2/3 yards of fabric to make each hat for the school play. Write and solve an equation to find how many hats she can make with 6 yards of fabric. Okay, now let's think about this. We know that it says she needs 2/3 yards for each hat. Okay, we don't know the number of hats, but we do know that she has 6 yards of fabric that she can use. So you can see here what your book did was 2/3 yards of fabric. Of generally means to multiply. So they're taking 2/3 times, okay, the number of hats, or n, equals 6. So then because it's a fractional coefficient, we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which would be 3/2. Those are going to cancel out, n is going to be left. And when you take 3/2 times 6, we should come up with 9. Okay, and so to answer the question, how many hats can she make? She can make 9 hats. All right. At this time, what I would like you to do is to go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and complete guided practice problems 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As we take a look at those guided practice problems, you've had a chance to go ahead and work through them on your own. So now let's take a look to see if your answers agree with what you should have. Taking a look at number 1, we should have been dividing both sides by 1.6, so k is going to equal 2. Taking a look at number 2, we should have been dividing both sides by -2.5, so therefore b is going to equal a -8 2/10. Number 3, we have a fractional coefficient, so in that case we should be multiplying both sides by the reciprocal. Reciprocal of -5/18 would be -18/5. Therefore, we're going to have 1 4/5 equals h. When we take a look at 4 and 5, your job was to write and solve an equation. So your equation for number 4 should be taken 5/10 times t equals 3. Divide both sides by 5/10, so t should equal 6 months. And then number 5, we're taking 3/4 of the fruit, so 3/4 times n equals 24, because you have 24 apples. Because it's a fractional coefficient, you're going to multiply both sides by 4/3. Therefore, n should equal 32. So we have 32 pieces of fruit. At this time, I would like you to go ahead and take a look at the website and check out and see which problems I would like you to do on pages, starting on page 463 with your extra practice.